Are you fascinated by the world of cybersecurity, but often feel like being successful in the field is like climbing a massive, impenetrable wall? Like you need some kind of secret code or superhuman strength to even get your foot on that first foothold? Well, it's time to grab your gear and get ready to climb because you've tuned in to Scaling the Wall, the podcast that breaks down the cybersecurity journey into manageable steps. I'm your host, Will Brooks. Each week, I'll be your guide as we talk to the real people who are living and breathing cybersecurity every single day. We'll hear their stories, learn from their experiences, and gather those golden nuggets of wisdom they've picked up along the way. No jargon, no hype, just real talk about what it takes to build a successful career in this exciting field. So whether you're a student just starting out, a career changer looking for a new challenge, or a seasoned pro wanting to stay ahead of the game, listen in as we scale the wall of cybersecurity together. So you're from England originally.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in England?
North London.
Oh, North London. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone
knows where that is, so that's nice.
I know where London is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to work at a summer camp when I was in high school, and they had a lot of international students, and we usually got a good amount from England. We had one from Nottingham, so obviously all I thought about was Robin Hood.
It's all anyone thinks about when they hear Nottingham.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing about conversations with them were the differences in like terms that Americans use in English, the English use. So we would call it paper towel, and the girl we were working with, her name was Sarah. She's like, "You passed the kitchen roll." And I was like, "What the heck is a kitchen roll? Do you guys use kitchen roll? Is that a thing?"
Yeah, kitchen roll, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, that sounded like sushi. So I didn't understand really what to do with that. But it's just fun, like learning the different nuances and terms and stuff. But how long have you been in the States?
I've been here 4 years now, and
Okay.
I do my Brit in America posts each week, and I've
I
been
love
doing
those.
them for almost 2 years, and I'm not running out of things yet. So there must be a finite number, but I haven't found it.
I don't think you're ever going to run out of things. There's enough observations.
Yeah.
Especially having kids too. You probably see how kids are developing in America versus what you experienced in London. It's probably very different.
Yes.
But I guess we could do a whole episode on being a Brit in America, but
We could.
today we're talking about IR. So can you share a little bit about your background and kind of how you got involved in the cybersecurity space and where your specialties kind of lie? Maybe start there.
Sure. I founded a recruitment company that was in the UK and the US, and someone said to us very early on, "Hey, you should check out this cyber thing. It might be big." So we did, and doubled down on that very quickly. So I've been in cyber and around cyber for a very long time. But for about 3 years, I've been in a threat intelligence company. And then within the last year, I've joined Surefire Cyber, which is an incident response company. So that's a background for me.
Got it. So you're well versed in incident response, which is going to be really good. And we have a lot of MSPs who we work with over at FifthWall, but just in general, the whole nature of the podcast, we get a lot of conversations about incident response. So, maybe obviously we have some kind of questions around IR, but maybe before we go into any of those, what do you kind of see in preparedness around incident response? Is it something a lot of businesses are starting to take more seriously, or are you still having to go in and coach them up on the importance of it? What's that all kind of looking like?
There is a real range. I think for much larger companies, yes, they do have incident response plans. They do tabletop exercises. They are pretty well prepared. Even then, things don't go the way your tabletop exercise went. So there is still some new decisions or new things that you've got to think about. But when it comes to smaller businesses, no, a lot of the times they haven't really thought about this. They've never talked about these things before. And that's where you see a little bit of panic or bad decision making, because you haven't had to think about it. You haven't talked about it. You haven't planned for it. And you're doing that in a really heightened stress situation.
Are you saying like panic decision making, heightened stress because they're not thinking incident response until they're undergoing an incident? Is that what you're...
Exactly. Yeah. And that's is really stressful, right? You come in and you can't work, and there's someone demanding money from you, and that's horrible. Like your business is at risk, everything you've worked for. So we're very understanding that that is your worst day, and that's not a good place to be in making decisions for anyone. Like it's not good when you've thought about it, but it's really not good when you haven't had to think about that in advance.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, before we move into the do's of incident response, like what MSPs should be doing and looking for and all that good stuff, what are some of the things you see? So you have these companies who don't have incident response plans, or maybe that. What are some of the biggest kind of flubs? I'll say flubs that you kind of see when undergoing IR without an incident response plan. What are some of those knee jerk reactions that people do that might not be so great? Have you seen anything like that?
I think the thing that I was going to focus on, because it's really relevant to MSPs, is for the companies that do have an MSP. Because what we sometimes see is the MSP have been in there already. They may be the ones that spotted it, alerted the company, or have been probably the first call. That's reasonable, right? You're going to call your
Yeah,
MSP first. And so they've taken some action. And often it's good action. They've often done the right things that you would want them to do. And that makes sense too, right? You're used to problem solving. You're used to getting a problem, not having seen it before, figuring it out and going and doing the right things. But because there isn't a plan and because maybe it isn't the thing that you do all the time, sometimes things can get missed, or things that we would do as an incident response company who do see it all the time would have got to a little quicker. So I think it's really important that MSPs can understand the value of having a specialist come in earlier on in that process.
yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's almost like MSPs are often being asked to be this jack of all trades, which can be really hard when you come down. I mean, we see it on the insurance side. They're getting presented with insurance forms and all sorts of things that, I mean, they're not licensed in. And honestly, I don't blame them for not wanting to talk about them in depth, because it's not something that specifically they specifically went in the industry to do. And I think incident response, at least from what I've experienced, is so much more than, hey, MSP, get my systems back up online, right? I mean, that's what I see a lot of. Is there's this pressure from the client to say, my system's down, I can't do anything, I'm stuck, I can't work, I'm not making money, fix my computer. But I guess what's missing there is, what do MSPs tend to sometimes miss on what they need to do in incident response because of that pressure? Do you see that? And that's where the benefit comes in of working with a specialist.
Yeah, there's two risks really. Risk number one is that actually you do get everyone back up to work and everyone stops worrying and goes about their day. And we do see this sometimes. Hey, we saw something funny a few months ago. Our MSP fixed the problem, but now they're back. And now we've had to call you and now we've got a claim. And actually, they may have been in the network the whole time, or they've had access the whole time because the right things weren't done the first time around. And now you've got a bigger problem. So that's the first thing that we sometimes see. And then the second thing is sometimes they've done so much work to get you back up and running, we've lost evidence. So we don't have the right logs or the right things to go and do the forensic investigation on. And you might think, well, I don't care. I got back up and running. Like, why did I need that? But there's a lot of legal considerations as well that people don't always think about. You know, if your data's been leaked, there's a lot of regulations across the US. Most states now have some sort of disclosure requirement. So you might be required to make those disclosures, and actually you've lost a lot of evidence that would have been crucial to planning how you go about that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So, and again, we see that from the insurance perspective, is carriers don't want to pay a full claim out if they don't need to, or they don't want to pay $1 million out on $1 million policy. And if we can make sure that the IR is in place to keep those costs down, especially potential legal fees and notification response stuff, that can be really beneficial in the claims process too. Um, so what are some things that you might suggest to an MSP who's kind of just starting to develop an IR plan? Are there certain strategies to look for? Obviously, working with specialists is helpful, but what are some of the things that you would recommend they consider in IR that's much more than just close the endpoints and be done with it? You know?
I think knowing if your clients or if you've got insurance, that's really important. Knowing who to call and when and what that process is, because the insurance companies kind of get a bad, unfair reputation, as MSPs have with them, right? But they do pay claims. They just have a process. They have suppliers that they want you to use because they've vetted them and they've got the right rates. So knowing who that insurance company is and how to get to them quickly, like that can really save you time. Sometimes we see people that have known they've had a problem for 2 or 3 days, but it's taken them a while to get to us. So if you've got that there as part of your plan, you're going to get to a specialist much more quickly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Um, do you, I guess, clients having an incident and you're not hearing about it for 3 days, like what kind of damage can that do to to not even bring in incident response for 72 hours after an incident? What can that lead to?
You've probably damaged your business because you haven't really been able to operate for a few days. But
Yep.
you've also got to think about negotiations with threat actors, right? Particularly if it's a ransomware case. So that's 3 days you haven't been in contact with them. That's 3 days closer to them publishing your data. And that can cause you some problems as you go through that process, if whether you're going to pay or not, because you've just lost that time in negotiations with them. And that's something that you're probably not thinking about if you haven't thought about it and prepared in advance. You're just thinking about getting back up and running, getting this off my system, hopefully not having to pay. You're not thinking about talking to ransomware groups.
Right. I mean, that is the song and dance, I think. Okay, so I've heard about ransomware negotiations. Obviously, with insurance claims, they bring in people to negotiate ransom. Do ransomware threat actors like expect negotiations to happen, and that's why they like what do they just plan on that being a thing? It's interesting to me. Like we always talk about it, and it tends to be a piece of the recovery. So part of IR is people coming in and negotiating the ransom, and the threat actors actually will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. They have websites. Like some of the more well-resourced ones have websites. They're set up like businesses. They have chat functions. They call themselves support, and they respond. They can go over days or weeks, and they do expect some sort of negotiation. They do expect to provide proof that they've taken your data. So yeah, absolutely, they expect that. Um, and the value of having someone who's really experienced in that is knowing, hey, this group tend to do these type of things. They tend to give this type of discount. They tend to take this amount of time. They may or may not publish your data, whether they say they will or not. So having the person that does that all the time can stay calm. If you're thinking about doing that yourself, I would be really panicked.
Me too.
Just sending messages every 5 minutes. Hey, what's going on?
I'm like
It's
that
that.
when I chat on Amazon just to try and get a package to return. So I can't even think about doing it with threat actors.
Right, exactly. And you're already stressed. So having someone that knows how those things tend to go, particularly if it's a group they've worked with before, is that can be really valuable and really help you, if you do come into a situation where you feel you need to pay, potentially get a better deal.
That's actually really, I mean, just to harp on that a little bit, you talk about MSPs being kind of asked to be a jack of all trades. To think of an MSP having to come in and negotiate a ransom, um, at first, I guess when I would think of it, like to me, negotiating a ransom, you just go in and say, oh, well, you want 1 million, how about 250? Like that's in my head what a negotiation's like, but I didn't even think about the idea that you have these experts who have negotiated ransoms with these different ransomware gangs and know how each one kind of behaves and focuses and functions. Um, I never really thought about that. They kind of have their own kind of character profiles, and what kind of leverage you might be able to get in those conversations. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so I guess as we look to put a bow on this, how often do you think MSPs should be revisiting those IR plans with their clients, and how often should they be updating those plans and making sure everyone kind of understands what's on them?
I mean, ideally, you would have some sort of threat intel. So when the market and the ecosystem changes, you might go and revisit it then. But I would say at least every year. If you're doing that and having that conversation every year, keeping it top of mind, then at least you've had that conversation. Or perhaps when people change, if the business leadership team has changed significantly, then actually you've got people in the room that have never had that conversation with each other before. So that might be another good opportunity for you to go back in. And these are things that you might be able to charge for as an MSP as well.
That's helpful. Have you seen MSPs charging for IR planning and things like that, or how's that kind of played out in the past?
I haven't seen it. I'm not sure personally that the MSP world has got there yet, right? Huge leaps in maturity in how we're approaching security, but I haven't really seen that. And there are specialist companies that do that on behalf of MSPs and smaller businesses and insurance companies. So whether it's something you really want to dive into or whether you want to work with someone else on, I think that's a decision based on your own comfort and maturity.
Awesome. So last thought here, what would be the ultimate reason for an MSP to bring in an IR specialist as opposed to trying to do it themselves? Like if you were to give like one simple reason, one very clear good reason as to why they should look to do that, what would you say?
The IR company has expertise that you shouldn't have. You shouldn't be dealing with the amount of incidents that we're dealing with, which means we will be faster and we will be more efficient than you will, and we'll take away some of that risk.
Scaling the Wall is brought to you by FifthWall Solutions, a cyber insurance company that partners directly with MSPs to make cyber insurance more accessible to their clients than ever. Check us out at fifthwallsolutions.com/MSP. If you like what you heard today, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or in the Spotify app, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.